Ladies, please support me by visiting my fragrance line, Fine Forever. Fine Forever is a fragrance with a promise, and we have our signature fragrance 2911, which is a beautiful feminine scent. You can get 20% off of your fragrance by using the code FOREVER by visiting fineforever.com. It's a fragrance with a promise. Good morning, gorgeous. How are you ladies doing this morning? I hope you're all doing wonderful. For those of you who are new to my channel, welcome. I'm Dr. Michelle Dav. And for those of you who are returning, welcome back. Thank you for being here today for another video in session, Feminine Rehab. We're continuing our series, Beauty and Boundaries. And today we're discussing boundaries with yourself. We've had lots of other videos talking about how you, as a feminine woman, can have boundaries with other people, like your friends, your parents, in dating. And today we're going to talk about one of the most important part of boundaries is keeping yourself accountable by having limitations on what you do and do not do. So I'm super excited to talk about this. I want you to go ahead and sit back, relax, get something to drink, get something to write with, and let's talk about this. So the idea of having boundaries with yourself as a feminine woman is the idea of thinking about your self-imposed limitations. These are things that you are telling yourself that you're going to do and things that you're choosing not to do. No one is forcing you to do any of these things, but these are going to be the things that help to make you the person that you are. So I want you to think about this. Do you take yourself seriously as a person? If you tell yourself you're not going to do something, can you follow your own rules? An essential part of being a mature woman is having limits to the choices that you make. Your life is free for you to do whatever it is that you want to do. But at certain points in time, you do have to step back and think, is what I'm doing serving me? Now, so many of us women have never had any healthy adults or role models to sort of teach us how to have boundaries with ourselves. Depending on what kind of home you grew up in, this is one of those things that your parents should have molded you to be able to stand on your own as an adult to do. However, if you had parents who struggled with setting boundaries for you, maybe they had no restrictions and let you do whatever you wanted as a child, or perhaps you had parents that were too strict and had so many limitations on you that you weren't able to do anything that you wanted to do. Maybe your parents suffered from addictions or were workaholics and were never really around to help you. Maybe you had parents who saw you only on the weekends and wanted to do things to sort of please you, like give you excessive sugar and junk food and allow you to just be free so that they could feel that they were that special parent to you. And some of us lack boundaries because we ourselves have things that we struggle with. Perhaps we have a mental health disorder that stops us from being able to set limitations on ourselves. Maybe we just have a lack of maturity. Some of us struggle with things like ADHD and things that kind of affect our impulse control. So we struggle to maintain a sense of boundaries. And then there's those of us who don't have boundaries because we just feel it's too limiting. We want to live a life where we can do whatever we want, and we feel that having boundaries on our lives restricts us from living a full life. However, in America, we have this culture of overindulgence. A lot of us feel like we can just do whatever we want with no consequences. And when the consequences come, at that point, it's too late, and we feel so self-defeated. So the goal is to get in front of that and to think about your life in all aspects and think about whether or not you have enough boundaries to really be a successful woman. This culture of self-love has sort of infringed on our boundaries, this YOLO culture where we feel like we have to give ourselves things in order to please ourselves, in order to truly be happy. And the more we do it, the more that we indulge, the happier that we are as a person. And that's the furthest from the truth when you go overboard. And this mentality can make it very easy to go overboard. And there is something as going overboard that is a real thing. You can YOLO to the point where you are in trouble, or you are sick, or you are broke. And we're trying to make sure that that doesn't happen with you. So when you think about boundaries, the first thing I want you to consider are, what are your values? What are things that you as a woman say that you value in your life and you prioritize in your life? What is important to you? So I'm going to give you some examples of boundaries with yourself that you can sort of think about. And there are different categories in your life that, boundaries are needed in. So perhaps maybe with your finances, you're fine, but with your leisure, you're not so good. So I don't want you to be down on yourself or hard on yourself. I just want you to self-reflect. So in the area of leisure, some boundaries that you can consider are what kind of movies and TV shows you watch. Do they serve you? Do you sit there for hours and hours at a time, binge watching Netflix or different shows or movies? Do you have boundaries over the kinds of movies and shows that you watch? Do you watch shows that are very violent or sexually explicit or have a lot of negativity or goriness to it? Do you set boundaries on what you allow your mind to consume? How much time are you spending on social media? Do you spend hours scrolling and looking at other people's lives, or hours on your own post trying to make it perfect? Are you scrolling when you should be doing something else? Are you scrolling when you're out with your friends and having lunch? Are you constantly on your phone? One of the most difficult things about social media is it does consume us, and we have a culture of not setting enough boundaries on that. So it infringes upon our friendships and our time that we should be spending on so many other things. For example, driving. Do you have boundaries on using your phone while you're driving? Do you say, I will not touch my phone until I get to my destination? Is it the first thing you look at when you wake up in the morning? Do you have any boundaries around your morning routine as to what you allow yourself to consume? Other boundaries with leisure include having a television maybe in your bedroom. Okay, maybe you say, I don't want to have TVs in my room because it takes up time with my spouse or with my children, and I want to be able to be free from that. Oversleeping. Okay, that's a big boundary as an adult that some of us have because maybe as a child we weren't allowed to sleep that long. I know I had very structured rules around sleeping as I grew up, and when I got to college, I was so happy to be able to sleep as much as I could that I would sleep for hours and hours and miss classes and events just to be able to feel like I had the luxury of sleeping. So these are things, again, I want you to think about. Do you oversleep? Do you have any structure around how much time you sleep? There are boundaries that have to do with our money. How much money do you spend shopping? Online shopping? How much are you spending on coffee every day? How much coffee are you drinking every day? Is 1 cup enough, or do you have to have 3 or 4 cups? Do you have limitations around how much caffeine you consume? Do you have a savings account? Okay, is that something that's important to you? Do you value having money in your bank account? And we also have boundaries in leisure in terms of the workplace. Okay, when you go to work, do you have boundaries there in terms of what you decide to talk about with your coworkers? Do you say, okay, at work, I do not want to discuss my personal life. I don't want to discuss who I'm dating. I don't want to discuss other people. I have boundaries around my social life at work. Do you check your emails constantly when you go home? Are you on your phone at night responding to things that have to do with the next morning at work? Or do you spend time with your family or time with yourself? There are also boundaries that impact our social life very greatly in terms of your children, making sure that you are with them and present. Do you struggle when you have a phone call and maybe you're helping your daughter with her homework and you rather chat on the phone with this person and catch up on gossip or whatever it is versus helping your daughter with homework in that moment? This goes back to your personal values. Do you value that family time with your daughter more than chit-chatting with your friends? Are you able to control yourself on social media in terms of your social life? For example, maybe stalking, maybe checking up on what your ex-boyfriend's doing or what a friend is doing that you don't talk to anymore and spending time on their page, maybe creating a false page so that you can check up on them. Do you have boundaries to say, if I broke up with someone, I'm not going to continue texting them and calling them? If someone's told me to leave them alone or let's go our separate ways, I'm not going to create a fake page and look at what they're doing. I have boundaries around what I'm doing as a person. The same concept comes up in terms of pornography. A lot of you ladies have told me this is an area that you struggle with greatly. You're not able to stop yourself from watching porn, and it gets to the point where you are truly trapped and you feel like a slave to this lifestyle. So do you have boundaries around what you allow yourself to do in terms of personal gratification or personal pleasure? Are you able to stop yourself and say, okay, I'm not going to do this, even if it feels good, or even if I'm so used to it, or if it's a habit, I'm choosing to stop. So I know all these things are just examples, and there's so many more, and you can leave me a comment and tell me if you struggle in any of these areas, or if there are other areas that you struggle in terms of personal boundaries. But as you can see, these are very everyday things, and we a lot of times don't take enough time to think about what we're really doing with our time. And we don't think about whether or not we take ourselves seriously enough to make a change. So you're thinking, okay, that's great, but how do I do this? How do I stop doing these things that have become habits, or doing these things that are taking away from my life? Well, with anything, the first thing I would want you to do is to reflect. Take some time when you have some time in the morning or in the evening, and sit there with a journal or with your phone and write down areas in your life that you know stand out to you as areas for change. We all have areas that we know we struggle in. And a lot of these things we've been dealing with for years, and we say, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. We tell ourselves that. And a lot of times we struggle to maintain that. We struggle to overcome it, but we know that we want to change. So write it down and make it real. Make it plain, make it simple, and come up with a list of things. And then I want you to think about what the priority is in your life. What kind of life do you want to have? Think about what kind of woman you are. Are you a woman who is a go-getter? Are you a woman who is a family woman? You enjoy being a mother or a daughter or a sister? Are you a woman who values her time to herself? What are some things that you value? And start looking at whether or not your life reflects the woman that you want to be. And with everything, starting off with prayer, praying and asking the Lord to help you, to show you the areas in your life that you're struggling with in terms of boundaries, and asking for help. This is one of those things that I struggled with greatly. Every year, whether it was New Year's or it was my birthday, I would sit down and come up with a long list of things that I wasn't going to do. And I would tape it onto the side of my bed, and I would look at it every morning, and I still struggled. It was like the most defeating thing because I really wanted to change, but for some reason I just couldn't. My own will wasn't enough. But it did help to be able to have a visual reminder every day, like no gossiping at work. And I would see it before I went to work. And sometimes I would think about it, sometimes I wouldn't. But what helped me the most was prayer and asking God to help me, and fasting, taking that issue and taking some time to deprive myself of pleasures and spending time with the Lord and asking Him for assistance in this area and showing me how to overcome it, or giving me the strength to be able to overcome it, giving me resources like books or people to help give me strategies to be able to overcome it, and setting up some structure in your life. Having structure is going to change everything. If you struggle with, let's say, checking your phone every morning and looking at social media, then come up with a morning routine and stick to it. Have an accountability partner or someone who can check up on you and ask, oh, so how's your morning routine going? Even just that one question can just bring you back to knowing that this is a goal that you set for yourself. So if you have a structured routine where you wake up, you have a cup of coffee, you journal, you pray, you do a face mask, you're limiting yourself and saying, okay, I'm not going to check social media, but I'm going to do all these other things that help me. So even though you're limiting yourself in one area, you're actually helping yourself in every other area. Because ultimately, when you don't have boundaries, you're stealing from your life. With everything, this takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. Not to say it can't happen overnight, because it can, but it doesn't normally happen overnight. It takes time and it takes dedication. And for some of you who are more visual, you can even have like a calendar or some sort of visual reminder that you're doing something different. And you can mark off how many days you've been able to stay away from texting your ex. And you see it every day, marking off on your calendar. It's been 20 days since I text him. After a while, you won't need it anymore. You won't be doing it anymore. You've created that habit and you've changed your brain in a sense that you're no longer seeking that. If you're not able to have boundaries with yourself, then you will struggle in having boundaries with other people. If you don't take yourself seriously enough to say that when you say something to yourself, you mean it, then it'll be very hard for you to say something to someone else and mean it. A lot of times you allow things that you said you wouldn't allow if you can't do it with yourself. So this is the most important area of development, is setting limitations that will truly help you. They're not harming you. They will help you, and they will protect you from getting yourself into areas that you may have a hard time getting out of. I really want you to focus on this, to think about it, to pray about it. And for those of you who want more on this, then I want you to visit my podcast, A Feminine Impression, where I'm talking a little bit more about setting boundaries with yourself, some examples of what that can look like, and some things that sort of stop us from being able to do that on a daily basis. So make sure to visit my podcast, A Feminine Impression, and also visit me on my social media platforms on Instagram at Dr. Michelle Daff and at A Feminine Impression on Instagram. Remember, there's nothing that you cannot overcome. Your life can change drastically in one day from one decision, but it's so important for you to seek God and get that spiritual help that can overcome any strongholds, anything that's getting in the way that you can't see here in the visible world, but it's truly impacting you. I thank you so much for all of your love. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your support. And I'm so proud of each and every one of you for being here, reflecting, changing, and growing. Until next time, my loves, remember that in all things you do, make a feminine impression. Bye-bye.